Hola, muy buenas tardes. Volvemos a el espacio, a un nuevo espacio del Perú Venture Capital Series. Vamos a hablar ahora sobre datos de Venture Capital. Tenemos el gran gusto de tener a Miguel Algarin, que es el director de Research de LAVCA. LAVCA es la Asociación de Capital Privado para América Latina y pionero en la provisión de datos de la industria y de muchas otras cosas más que seguramente Miguel nos va a poder ir contando a lo largo de la presentación. Esta presentación va a ser en inglés, pero tienen también el audio disponible en español, en traducción simultánea. So Miguel, switching to English now, thank you very much for being here and participating in the Peru Venture Capital Series. Second year in a row now, very happy to have you again. And well, it's on you to show us this interesting data that you gather.
Thank you so much, Luis. Yes, I attended the Peru Venture Capital Conference last year. It was actually my first time in Peru. I'm upset that we are unable to do this in person. You know, I'm missing out on my opportunity to have the best ceviche in the world, in my opinion. Yeah. But hopefully things will regulate by next year, and we can do this. We can do this in person in 2021. It's affected us as well. We usually have our LAVCA Week conference in September, and it usually lasts a whole week. 2 days. It was 4 days long. 2 days, 2 or 3 days. We focus on PE, and 1 day we focus on venture. We're going online as well for that. So new challenges being introduced across the board by the pandemic, but we'll overcome and hopefully see each other in person sometime soon. So
exactly. We'll have that ceviche next year for sure.
Exactly. So yeah, pardon me for using Spanish. Soy latino, pero no hablo español exactamente fluido porque mis padres no me enseñaron. So I am more comfortable in English. And I'm going to present Latin American venture capital, give you folks a sense of some of the activity that we've seen in 2019, which was a blockbuster record year, as well as some of the activity that we've seen through the first half of 2020. And by way of further introduction, again, we are LAVCA, and we are the Association for Private Capital Investment in Latin America. We're a nonprofit membership organization, which is dedicated to supporting the growth of private capital in Latin America and the Caribbean. LAVCA's membership is comprised of, I believe, over 200 firms now, from large leading global investment firms active in the region to small seed and accelerator local fund managers, family offices as well. We also have a lot of LP members, which include, global sovereign wealth funds, as well as some of the large pension funds that operate in the region, corporate investors as well. And in total, our member firms control assets in excess of $65 billion, directed at capitalizing and growing Latin American businesses. So with that said, let's go into the VC investment trends that we've been seeing here at LAVCA in the region. So for those of you familiar, over the last 3 years, LATAM VC has exploded. I actually started at LAVCA 2 years ago in 2018, and that was right as things began to take off. So here is LAVCA statistics of the amount of venture capital dollars being invested by year, as well as the deal count in that kind of yellow-orange color, or number of transactions right next to it. So you can see right here, I'm going to use a little laser pointer, that it was pretty much the same year over year, with a little bit of growth early on, but starting in 2013, it achieved about $500 million, and it stayed the same more or less up to 2016. 2017 was the first year that we saw kind of a big explosion, a doubling. And since 2016, we've Latin American venture capital has doubled year over year, reaching 4.6 billion last year. So part of that absolute explosion in large rounds is influenced and led by the announcement and deployment of capital from SoftBank's $5 billion Latin American Innovation Fund, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. There's been a lot of media coverage on that fund has been very disruptive to the market in a good way, and has brought a lot of media attention to the venture capital ecosystem, as well as a lot of the brilliant entrepreneurs and minds that are operating in Latin America. But I don't want to overstate SoftBank's impact, right? Because the venture capital ecosystem had been growing at a significant clip year over year. And actually, if you strip out SoftBank's rounds, so in 2019, they invested or led rounds which were for about 2.5 billion. So let's remove that 2.5 billion from this 4.6 billion amount, right? Let's say, let's pretend as if SoftBank didn't exist. If you do that, this number goes down to about 2.1 billion, and you see that there's still growth, right? From 1.9 to 2.1 billion. There's still significant growth, and there is an ecosystem that is evolving and maturing. The same could be said for, if you compare first half of 2019 to first half of 2020. In the first half of 2019, SoftBank led rounds that were responsible for $1.8 billion. And in the first half of 2020, they've kind of slowed their investment activity. They're not investing as quickly as they did last year. So for the first half of 2020, SoftBank was only responsible for about 200 million. So again, if you strip out SoftBank's rounds, this number would go down to 1 billion. This number would go down to about 800 million. That would make the first half of 2020 the best first half without SoftBank, the best first half in LAVCA statistics. And I think that's an important point to make, because it really demonstrates that while SoftBank is welcome and valued, and has co-invested with a lot of the fund managers, the local fund managers. They've also served as LPs and committed capital to some funds. I think what we've seen is that the media at times overstates the importance of SoftBank, while understating the fact that there is a LATAM VC ecosystem that is growing, that is evolving, that is maturing, and had achieved momentum prior to SoftBank's entry into the market. I think this, for first half of 2020, also this is an absolutely encouraging sign, because the pandemic hit, probably at the end of the first quarter, beginning of second quarter, and the fact that this growth in venture capital investment is sustained shows the staying power of the VC ecosystem in Latin America. So the next slide, is the Latin American unicorn leaderboard. As these rounds have increased, as more venture capital firms become interested in Latin American entrepreneurs, we've seen more and more unicorns. So this slide is a little bit dated, but it gives you a sense of all of the different unicorns that have risen in Latin America. This board is actually not updated. It's a little bit old, but we have 3 additions that we could add here. One of them being eBanks, which is a Brazilian payments processor, which achieved unicorn status in October of 2019 after receiving a round led by FTV Capital. The second is Loft, which is a Brazilian prop tech, which achieved unicorn status earlier this year after receiving a $175 million round in January. And the last is Wildlife Studios, which is a very successful and growing mobile gaming developer. And they achieved unicorn status in December and as of a few weeks ago, received another round of capital for $120 million. So on the later stage, we're also seeing significant growth and significant interest from local fund managers as well as global VC fund managers willing to expend capital into these growing companies. The next fund I wanted to highlight was the startup ecosystem maturity, and also just to talk about the records that were made last year. So everything that is bolded, every dollar or number amount that is bolded was a record in Latin and LAVCA statistics. So you can see that in 2019, 3.2 billion was invested in expansion stage deals, a record. In 2019, 1.2 billion was invested in early stage deals, a record. And in 2019, 204 million was invested across 241 seed deals, so both a record in dollar amounts and in the number of deals. This also gives the breakdown for the first half of 2020. And you see what's interesting here, and again, a sign of the growth and evolution of the VC ecosystem in Latin America, is that early stage dollar amount is actually more than 50% of the capital that has been expended so far through the first half of 2020. Typically, expansion stage deals lead. I think they've led pretty much every year when it comes to LAVCA statistics. But what we see through the pandemic is that there has been more of a focus on early stage startups. And to me, that is, the fact that I believe it's about 56% of the total dollars invested through the first half of 2020 were invested in early stage startups. That is a good sign, a very good sign for the VC ecosystem. The next slide is a geographical distribution. Unsurprising, Brazil has always been the target for a majority of VC dollars and private capital dollars in general, right? It's the largest market. It's the most dynamic in many ways. So it continues to receive about 60% of the total VC dollars that are invested. Some years it's 50, 55, 60. Mexico, also a considerable market, frequently is the second most desirable market for VC deals. Colombia has been growing and becoming more important, and I really credit the Colombian government for fostering a good environment for startups. I know that they've committed significant public capital to establishing kind of co-working spaces. And they've also put a very significant focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, startups. So Colombia is definitely a market to watch. And Chile and Argentina, smaller markets for VC, but they frequently have very consistent VC dollars that are invested in those markets. Unfortunately, and the other is where Peru would appear. But I think there is growth that is occurring in the Peruvian market, in the Peruvian ecosystem as well, which I'm going to discuss on the next slide. So these are some of the Peruvian companies that we track in our statistics. Many of them have received multiple rounds of capital. I'm sure for the Peruvian audience, you're very familiar with all of these firms. So the first one being Crejana, which has received multiple rounds from 2017 to 2020, and actually through the pandemic is recording a 40% increase in demand, specifically in the Mexican market. So our understanding is that their EdTech solutions for creative and digital professionals have really taken off during the pandemic. Tienda Pago also has a supply chain fintech for small retailers, has received VC VC backing. Chati, a payment platform for social media apps like Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook Messenger received capital as well. Kulki, another payment platform, has received capital. Chasqui, it is an urban delivery platform, and actually they acquired the Chilean logistics company Todova in July as they look to expand into the Chilean market. Fitco is a management and retention software for gyms and sports centers. Quantum Talent, a SaaS or software as a service startup that offers human resources solutions to connect workers and businesses. Kenua, which is a digital security provider that specializes in identity verification and e-signatures. And lastly, Apurata, which is a fintech provider of consumer loans to Latin America's underbanked population. So you can see, some of these startups have received multiple rounds. Many of them have received capital from investors that are co-investing. That shows kind of the cross-border appeal to investors that some of these Peruvian startups have. And lastly, worth mentioning, we don't account for it in our statistics, but there's been a couple of CVC deals. Independencia received $5 million from CVC investors last year. And Tumi Robotics is a robotics company which received funding from Hacks Accelerator, which is based in China, to give you a sense of the growing, the young, nascent, but growing ecosystem in Peru. So the next slide is just highlighting some of the notable 2020 transactions that have occurred so far. The vast majority of them have, have occurred in the Brazilian market. Some of these we've touched on. I touched on Wildlife Studios. We touched on Loft, both who have become unicorns. iFood is trying to take on Rappi by acquiring Domicilios. And there's a couple of other interesting stories here. Auth0, which was founded by Argentinian founders, as well as the acquisition of Grupo SAP by the OLX group. So when it comes to specific VC sectors, I think it's not unsurprising that fintech remains the VC subsector that continues to attract the most VC dollars. And you can see that in Peru, as I went through those startups, the vast majority of them were fintech or payment solutions based. Many fintech companies are uniquely positioned to provide services to businesses that don't have access to traditional financing, and also to provide much of Latin America's underbanked population with mobile banking solutions or payment solutions. EdTech is also a growing subsector, especially through the pandemic. More and more consumers are looking for digital education solutions, both for grade school students as well as for university students. But two of the other subsectors which we see a lot of growth in and we wanted to highlight are logistics, as well as health tech and biotech. And so we wanted to kind of just shine a light on a couple of these companies in other parts of Latin America. CargoX is a big player and probably on the way to becoming a unicorn. They provide trucking logistics solutions in the Brazilian market. Tembici is a Brazilian micro-mobility platform which focuses on bikes. Liftit, also similar to CargoX, but operates in the Colombian market, trying to find more easier solutions for large-scale logistics and distribution. I think we're going to see more and more of this as Latin American governments continue to prioritize infrastructure projects and roadways. Colombia, for example, is extremely mountainous. And so a company like this is providing faster shipping and delivery solutions for small and medium-sized enterprises. As I said, the other subsector I want to highlight is Healthtech, right? All of these Conexão Saúde, Alice or Alice, I'm assuming they would pronounce that in Brazil, as well as People Saúde, all of them providing kind of digital health solutions. Conexão Saúde is actually a telemedicine marketplace. Alice is a healthcare provider that was founded by the founders of 99 and Dr. Consulta. I believe they also offer some telemedicine solutions. And then People Saúde, which is a health plan management platform for Brazilian employees. The next thing that I wanted to talk about and highlight very briefly, I want to leave some time for questions that we're running up against the half-hour mark here, was our startup directory, which actually is a public good. So I really would suggest to the folks that are listening, please go on our website and look at our statistics, look at some of our published or some of our reports. This is the most recent one that we did. We do a startup directory every year, and we include new startups that have raised at least $1 million in verified financing from venture capital fund managers specifically. So because last year was such a big year in the market, we wanted to kind of expand our focus. This product typically in 2018 was on our website, 2019 was a PDF. This year it is also a PDF, but we wanted to make it larger, right? We wanted to also reach out to the entrepreneurs and get their viewpoint into the ecosystem. So for this directory, it included 126 startups, 75 of whom received their first disclosed institutional capital, and we actually surveyed and spoke to the CEOs or founders of 74 of these startups to kind of understand how they are navigating COVID. So this is just a distribution of those who responded and those we reached out to in the startup directory. Unsurprising, that 29% of them are fintech, but also followed by prop tech, SaaS, e-commerce, healthcare, biotech, edtech. These are the key VC subsectors. Also unsurprising that 57% of those in the startup directory were early stage startups. But again, I think that's a sign of the growth, right? If we looked back at a startup directory, let's say in 2017 or prior, the distribution would have been more heavy on the seed incubator side, I would say. And the fact that there's so many early stage startups that are receiving institutional capital is a good sign for the ecosystem. One of the questions we asked was about how startups are reacting to COVID-19. On the LAVCA side, thankfully, we haven't seen the pandemic put too many companies out of business. These companies, you would think, would be more sensitive, right? Because some of them are not profitable yet, or some of them do not have significant assets to pay back debt that they may have acquired as they've grown. But many of them have been making cuts here and there. Some of them have been provided more working capital from their VC partners, their VC fund manager partners. And so far, most of the startups have sustained through the pandemic, which is a good thing to hear. And very quickly, this is just we also surveyed them on the impact of COVID-19 on their business, and you see, that is in the plurality, which is not unsurprising. But you know, you get a variety of different answers. And I think it depends on what the startup is focused on. You know, some startups that, for example, are providing EdTech solutions or grocery delivery products are finding their user base is growing dramatically. And others that maybe provide ride shares are finding their businesses more impacted. So let me wrap that up because I want to leave, you know, at least a few minutes for questions. Please go to lavca.org/VC. You can view the startup directory. You can see all of the companies that are in there, and as well as a little bit more details on some of the questions that we asked. Also, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us at research@lavca.org. And if you have any news about investments or any type of deal activity or any type of VC-related activity, we ask that you please feel free to email us at news@lavca.org. Lastly, you know, I wanted to mention that, as I said earlier, this year we're doing our LAVCA Week annual investors meeting digitally. So for those of you that are interested in either attending our VC day or the other days that are more geared towards private equity and infrastructure, we welcome your attendance.
Thank you, Miguel. Like, really amazing data. It's always good to hear that investments are moving forward in the region. As I was mentioning also in the morning, we are publishing our report for 2020 first semester tomorrow. So we're very happy to see that the investment activity continues, and well, and that that is also a regional trend. I wanted to point out only two questions for you, given that we are also on time. The first one is I thought it was amazing your fact about early stage investment having at least 56% of the amount invested in the first semester of 2020. What do you think is that? What do you think now there's more investment on the earlier stages than in the expansion stage as it was in the previous years?
You know, I think that's a sign that I will credit SoftBank with bringing more global attention to Latin America. You know, I don't want to give them too much credit on helping to evolve the ecosystem, because I think there was already momentum there before they announced their innovation fund. But you know, there's so much media coverage around SoftBank and so much media coverage around their fund that I think it definitely brought more attention to Latin America and more attention to the brilliant entrepreneurs that exist throughout the Americas. And so what we're seeing is more global players like VC fund managers from Silicon Valley that maybe traditionally have only invested in the US market. All of a sudden they're paying attention to Mexico. All of a sudden they're paying attention to Colombia, to Brazil. The developed markets are very crowded. US is extremely competitive for VC dollars. Latin America, you know, not as competitive, and you can find some really valuable and disruptive companies there. So I think that, you know, the fact that early stage was 56%, one, it's a sign that the ecosystem has staying power, but two, it's a sign that you know, more people are interested in kind of these early stage entrepreneurs and realize that there's a lot of talent and value there in Latin America.
No, great, and yes, I think we also call it like the SoftBank effect here when we do our presentations. So definitely, it has helped a lot to especially to put in to visualize what's going on in the region, to all these entrepreneurs that are challenging the status quo. And the final remark, Miguel, and also an introduction to our next panel. I saw that in 2019, co-investments were really going on between regional funds and cross-border investment between different kind of investors. Anything you can point out on this regard? Any insights that you saw last year, or maybe you have seen also happening during the first semester of 2020 related to
So
point?
we actually typically include a slide that talks about co-investments. I removed it only because we didn't have that analysis for the first half of 2020. But from last year, from my memory, I think 97% of the dollars invested were rounds that were co-investment rounds. And I think the plurality were at least one non-LATAM VC fund manager investing with at least one LATAM-based fund manager. Those were the majority or the plurality of dollars invested. Second was, LATAM, I believe. So co-investments are hugely important. Most of the rounds that we're covering have at least two fund managers investing, but we're also seeing a lot of VC fund managers co-investing with CVC, with CVC funds, or with family offices, or with players that are traditionally LPs. There's, or even kind of development finance like IDB Lab, for example. That is I think a central and important piece to the VC ecosystem in Latin America. That trend we've seen from the beginning, and I think we're going to continue to see as the ecosystem evolves. Well,
thank you so much, and it's always, I think we always have much less time than we would want to with you and LAVCA, and we'll have I have a ton of questions here to run by you, but just in respect of the time of our next panelist, we're going to move on to the next panel. But Miguel, thank you a lot for participating and for providing this value through information and through connections that LAVCA provides to the region.
Thank you so much, Luis, and hopefully we'll be in person in Peru next year.
Yes, noted. Bye, Miguel.